Hey everyone, Eric Thompson here. As always, hope that you are doing well. Welcome back to the channel. Now, you've already seen the title of this video. You know what I'm going to say. Let's just get to it. Number 83 on the AFI Top 100, Titanic, 1997. Wow. And I could pretty much just say wow over and over and over again for the rest of this video. But we have to actually say some things. I think someone is robotilling outside. That's okay, that's okay. But we have to begin with the plot. The obvious plot is the maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic. A little more involved. We're following sort of a not treasure hunter crew, but a deep sea exploration team as they explore the wreckage of the Titanic and their quest to find the heart of the ocean, an extremely rare and valuable blue diamond. Okay, and as a survivor of the Titanic disaster shares her story, we learn about this love story between Jack and Rose. Rose, who was from a very wealthy, well-to-do, uppity, first-class family, and Jack, who was sort of an expat that's returning to the U.S. from England and all of these different things. Anyway, so that's what's happening. I guess, well, he didn't say where he was. I'm just guessing he was in England during his travels overseas. Maybe he was in Ireland and Scotland. I don't know. Anyway, I'll have Vegas check me on that. So Vegas, hit me with that knowledge. I want to know for sure. Anyway, that's what we explore through the storytelling and flashback of Rose, right? In the future, she's telling us the whole story flashbacking. Why is this film on the AFI Top 100? Well, lots of reasons. And I'm going to link you to the Wikipedia for the film, okay? Which I printed off here. Well, I printed off part of it, just I need notes. And I printed off 22 pages, and that wasn't even the whole thing, okay? And so I made some little notes, we're going to talk about in a minute here. But there's so much information here beyond plot synopsis, just talking about production and post-production and editing and receptions and criticisms and all those different things. And so check this out if you want to learn more about the film. A couple reasons, though, I think are worthwhile. Number one, after James Cameron wrote the scriptment, or script treatment for the film, he went to Columbia, I think it was. I'm gonna look. It was the production company, Paramount, excuse me, 20th Century Fox, and Lightstorm. He went to them and said, well, this is a quote. Look, we've got to do this whole opening scene where they're exploring the Titanic and they find the diamond. So we're going to have all these shots of the ship, Cameron stated. Now, we can either do them with elaborate models and motion control shots and CG and all that, which will cost X amount of money. Or we can spend X plus 30% and actually go shoot it at the real wreck. And that, of course, is what they did. The crew shot at the real wreck in 95, it says 95, somewhere in there, and they went down to the wreck 11 times, okay? Let's just hold the phone. This is a tremendous undertaking, okay? This is not basic research, okay? This is not the kind of basic research that anyone does in preparing for a film. No matter how intense the method actor is, no matter how thorough the producer is, the director, this is beyond any measure of preparation or production that I think anyone, any director in history had done up until this point, okay? Not only was it an incredible commitment of finance, remember, the Titanic cost $200 million to make. That's a lot of money. It was a lot of time too. It was a little while ago. It was a lot of money. But to go 11 times and to put people's lives at risk every time. Indeed, they say that James Cameron didn't even get the highest quality footage that he wanted because it was so dangerous. And you know, if it was stormy on the surface or any number of different conditions, he wasn't able to do quite what he wanted. And indeed, you know, equipment was damaged during all of this production, and lives could have been lost. Fortunately, nothing that terrible happened. But that is just one reason, okay, why I believe it belongs on the AFI Top 100. Number 100, my favorite, Ben-Hur, which we're going to talk about in relation to this in just a minute, was another film that had extravagant production value, okay? And now we're seeing that more and more and more, especially for what we would consider epic films. The production value has to be incredible, whether it's in CG, whether it's in set pieces, whether it's in wardrobe, even in music, which is certainly something of the case here, okay? So hold that thought. Also, why I believe it's on the AFI Top 100 is because it's an unashamed telling of a historical event, but with master craftsmanship in not only omitting some historical details, but telling true historical ones with unflinching accuracy. Now, we could call this hypocritical. You know, well, how could he, you know, take this part out but make this part up? Well, like Jack and Rose, for example. There's no real evidence that they existed, okay? They're truly fictional. But maybe you knew, or you're aware, that there was a boat that was actually quite close to the Titanic when it sank, the Californian. And they were the first to respond, right? And what Cameron did is he totally cut that out of the movie. And the reason why is because he wanted the Titanic itself, the ship, and the drama to be a metaphor for the end of the world, sort of a microcosm. And so just imagine if we had suddenly left the Titanic and gone to another boat that was however far away. You know, we'd be really far away from the end of the world, but he wants to keep us in the drama, in the intensity the whole time. And wow, he sure does. One more reason, okay, why it belongs on this list. Because you just don't see a lot of that. Either directors will approach a historical event and sort of dress it up real nice and make it just the way they want it. But then again, you have some directors thinking definitely of Steven Spielberg, who look at history and, you know, try to keep it as legit as possible. I feel like that's what Cameron did here, okay? I feel like he tried to, but I think that his master storytelling convicted him, you know, to remove some things, add some things, and the product is pretty good. I know the haters are going to say, what about Avatar? The story was so awful. Well, if Avatar was on the AFI Top 100, we'd be talking about it, okay? That seems like always the conversation I have with people. But that's precisely why, moving to our second question, you know, that's precisely why we're asking, is Titanic relevant? Keep in mind that James Cameron, you know, directed Titanic and did all the work on it, and he really didn't come back to do any other work until Avatar. Now, he did things in between, of course, but Avatar was his next big project, okay? And so, in a sense, you know, Titanic set that bar for him personally. When it came time for Avatar, we all expected a Titanic-level project. Now, here's where I struggle, and I think people struggle with either liking this movie or just honestly hating it, because things seem so surfacey. You don't really get too deep into the history of the Titanic. You learn about architecture and its creation and development and all these different things, but you don't really get under the skin, into the deep structure of what it was like to be on that ship. And sure, you know, you learn about the different classes. Frankly, you know, one criticism I've heard is that, you know, that this film contains, you know, class warfare. Even, you know, maybe even a little racism. You know, well, I mean, or class racism. Do you know what I mean? You know, how the upper class is just totally excluding the middle and lower classes. And you see that, you know, when Jack takes Rose down into the lower decks and they party, I guess, or whatever was the dancing. And so there's a lot of criticism around this movie for that reason, and the very same that Avatar received. I'm sure you heard over and over how it was just like Pocahontas and all of this. And to that, I can only really say that, you know, there are like, I got to do a video about this eventually, but there are really only like a dozen stories that are ever told in movies. And James Cameron happens to have both of them, you know, in Avatar and Titanic. You have an end of the world story, which is Titanic, and then you have a impossible love story, Avatar, right? And so it's no great surprise that his two movies, in that sense, these two at least, would be challenged in that way. But I do believe that the Titanic is relevant for today because of what it did on the production end, okay? If nothing else. And there's a lot else to say about it, but on the production end, let me read you some facts here. In the post-production, and indeed during the filming as well, they created a 5 million gallon tank to use for those water sequences. Now, I don't know how much water that is, but I think it's a lot of water, okay? And of course, please look at the Wikipedia because it goes on and on and on and on and on talking about it. Innovation, not only in the scale, right? The models, not just the models, but the recreations of the Titanic done as faithfully as possible. Did you hear, by the way, that there's some, I don't want to say philanthropist because I think he's just doing it for himself, but someone's rebuilding the Titanic to exact specification, and they're going to sail it on the same day from wherever it birthed from to New York. I'll try and find that. I'll put it in the description below if that's a real thing. I'll try to find it. Anyway, we saw an Avatar, of course, because it's his movie, but in movies since then, the approach to epic filmmaking has changed beautifully and radically. It's true. And for some reason, James Cameron is one of those guys that has been a true pioneer in the world of filmmaking. And this has been obviously rewarded because of how he's been recognized, okay? And whether or not the movies themselves are good, or you like them or not, or I like them, it doesn't really matter if we do or we don't. We like what we like. But the trailblazing that he has done in the world of cinematic technology, film production, editing, the way that film production is approached, these are what make this film completely relevant, because directors are doing today with what they're doing today, what Cameron was inventing in the early to mid-90s, okay? I know that there's a lot to say there about what those tactics are. So the techniques is certainly, obviously, in the camera technology. And of course, again, I just keep mentioning it, Cameron did it again with Avatar, with developing those super awesome 3D cameras. I just gotta stop. But those two questions, I feel like those are pretty good reasons, at least places to start with. But of course, with this film, the conversation goes on. Wait, I have some more thing. I'm sorry. I was talking with Tori about it the other day, and she didn't say this, but I know that other people have said, "Why would I watch the Titanic? I already know what's going to happen." Well, that's true. You know, of course, it's a great point. Why would you go pay the money to sit in a theater and watch this movie when you know in the end what's going to happen? Well, I'll tell you why I went and saw it. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I was very young, and I was very embarrassed with the nude sketching scene. And I was like, oh my gosh. it was the first time I'd seen a nude woman on the screen, you know. But that was what it was. My parents were very nervous too, but they were very gracious and let me see it, and I appreciate that. I went and saw it again with Tori when it was reissued in 3D, and it was awesome. We didn't go see it in a 4K theater, but the 3D was, man, it was good. I don't think Tori liked it very much, but she went along anyway, just for fun. I appreciate that. What keeps me in this movie, me personally, is of course the thing starts and it shows you the end of the movie, right? It shows you the wreckage. But what I care about is how we get to that point. And this is so typical in so many different forms of media, especially in television and in film. Half the time you already know what's going to happen at the end, right? You can tell without a doubt, oh, they're going to get back together. Oh, boy gets a girl. Oh, good guy kills bad guy. Oh, bad guy gets away. Whatever it is. You already know this before the movie's over. I think much of what defines the quality of a movie is how much you care about how they reach that conclusion. How does the guy get the girl? How does the good guy kill the bad guy? How does the bad guy get away? Whatever it is, okay? And for me, watching the story unfold, not only the romance between Jack and Rose, preposterous as it is, Michael, I've not forgotten about the door. I know. Maybe it was big. I don't know about buoyancy, okay? Anyway, but I find that I care about wanting to go through this experience. How do we get to that point? Not only where the boat is on the bottom of the ocean, but how does she come to this diamond, and how does she feel about that? All those different things that play into this grand, incredible story. And with such a great story, we'd be remiss if there was not some theology to follow up with it. And so my reflection here and what I see is probably obvious, but I think it's very poignant, for me anyway. Of course, as you know, the Titanic was sunk by an iceberg, an inanimate object that could have been and should have been totally avoided by those who were navigating this great vessel, but it wasn't. And even though, of course, it was definitely an accident and a disaster of attrition, right? It wasn't just the poking in the sides of the ship that sunk the boat, but it was the water filling up and crashing over the bulkheads and all these different things, and eventually enough water pressure and weight that it snapped the ship in half. Well, the ship kind of broke itself in half, really, I suppose. But it began with just that little bit of the iceberg that the ship sort of skimmed, and that was where it all sort of ended. And I thought, gosh darn it, isn't that spiritual life, or maybe life in general, where little things end up doing incredible damage? Maybe you've read the book by C.S. Lewis, The Screwtape Letters, which is a very challenging and haunting book about not demonology, but Lewis writes from the perspective of a junior demon who's getting instructions from his uncle about how to be a good demon and how to tempt and drag down the faithful. And so everything's kind of reversed, right? Like our Father in the demon sense is Satan, our Father below, not, as Christians would say, our Father above, and all of that. It's very cunning language. C.S. Lewis himself said that he wished that he had not been able to write that book, because it's so chilling to read it and to see yourself as the person the demon is chasing after. It's not really a dark book, but very challenging, maybe somewhat dark. It's hard to say. But here are just a couple quotes from this book that I want to offer to you, and then of course a passage from Scripture. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Not from Neverending Story, this is different. Murder is no better than cards, if cards do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. Hear that last sentence again. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. Just the tip of the iceberg. Don't have to run into it head first, just the tip, just a poke in the side of the unsinkable ship. We feel invincible, and that's sort of the most bitter wine that we can drink, by telling ourselves that we can do it all, we can defend our lives and defend our souls apart from God. Jesus himself struggled with those little things that the devil and people tried to get him with, especially in Luke 4, when Jesus is out in the wilderness being tempted by the devil. And maybe you remember the story. What is it that the devil tempts Jesus with? Well, he gives him the proposition of power and all of this, but in the end, Satan tempts Jesus with words. Just sentences. Here he says, Jesus ate nothing during those days and became hungry, of course. And the devil said to him, if you are the Son of Man, tell this stone to become bread. Now, the devil just could have offered him bread, theoretically, I guess. Why not offer him bread? It's a small thing. It's just a loaf of bread. It's a roll, a croissant. Instead, the devil uses words. Cunning, sly. Just the tip. Just the tip. Again, the devil led Jesus up on a mountain, presumably, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. So this also could be a supernatural moment. And the devil said to him, I will give you all this if you will bow down and worship me. You know, why just the proposal? Why not just give Jesus something or show him something? You know, hey, she showed him all the nations, of course. But he just used persuasion. Small, gradual. Now, of course, the end result would have been catastrophic if Jesus, the sinless one, had sinned and worshipped the devil, but he didn't. Because he was on that right course that the Titanic was not on. Okay? But even Jesus, the perfect Son of God, the Messiah, the Savior, was tempted with subtlety, was tempted in subtlety. And the devil knew that an all-out attack against the Son of God would have failed. But if he could just slip in, just find the little chink in his armor and just put an arrow just right in there, he thought maybe he could get Jesus to fall. Well, he didn't. Even Jesus, who laid in the ground for 3 days, sprung back up to life, okay? But in our lives, we find that subtlety, it's those little things that drag us down. C.S. Lewis, just a master of words and language, said so much more about that in the Screwtape Letters, which I can encourage you to at least try to read. You're not going to learn about the Titanic, but you're going to learn a lot about yourself. Okay? Wow. So let us be on guard, consequently. in the film, of course, you see the watchmen, and they're kind of playing around and joking, and once they see the iceberg, it's just too late. Even though they thought they had just missed it, you know, they didn't. It did more damage than they could have anticipated, and it led to a more disastrous end than could have been imagined. And so in our lives too, as the Bible says, let us be watchful, let us be vigilant, always on guard against the devil who, as the Bible says, roams around like a lion, seeking to devour who he may. A cunning enemy who doesn't just come out, you know. Well, I guess a lion would, of course, a pretty straightforward attack, but is calculated, all right? Now, I don't mean to say an iceberg is calculated, but I think you understand. Finally, back to the film. Titanic is among the great three. That's just what I call them. There actually isn't a great three. They don't call it a great three, but there are 3 films which have won 11 Academy Awards. The first one, of course, being Ben-Hur, the second one being Titanic, and the third, The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. There is no film to have won 12 Academy Awards yet. Titanic was nominated for 14, but won 11. And so the Academy recognized it in that much. And I think we should too. You don't have to like it, but I think we must at least recognize and say, a tip of the hat, a small tip, very small. Tip of the iceberg, tip of the hat. That's so stupid. And by the way, you know that sketch of Rose? James Cameron sketched it himself with his own hand. So that's kind of cool. A little trivia for you at the very end. Thank you so much for watching. That's number 83, Titanic. Number 82, Sunrise, coming up very soon indeed. That's the oldest film on the review. And so kind of neat to have a real big, huge movie like Titanic, and then right next to it, Sunrise, which I've not seen. Looking forward to watching it. Hopefully Tori will watch it with me, not watch me watching it. She'll watch it with me, and she'll be in that review. I hope she's in a review real soon. Thank you truly, friends. Hey, like and subscribe to the channel if you care to. Would sure appreciate your feedback. Let me know in the comment section below if you like this movie, if you hate it, if you can't stand it, if you can't get enough of it. Let me know. Thanks.